Okay, so in this video, I'm actually really excited. This is the start of a brand new series building a equipment request process using the Microsoft Power App platform. All right, so here we go with another series. This is going to be the digital equipment request process, and I think that this series is really important, is because one is going to be allow us to embrace and do a POC against the Power Platform, which is Microsoft's solution with packaging Power Apps, Microsoft Flow, and Power BI. Obviously, you can use any one of those tools or platforms individually to solve these issues, but Microsoft have a good reason why they package those together, because from a business perspective, you kind of need all three to kind of get a holistic solution to solve a common business problem. So one of the problems we're going to kind of toy with is a digital equipment request process. And let me go ahead and start this PowerPoint presentation. And why do we want to do this? So here's the what, the why, and the how. So the what is, we want to do a POC solving a real business scenario or common business scenario using the Microsoft Power Platform, and really trying to understand how all three of these components kind of fit together. And then two, where are some of the techniques or strategies we can use to really embrace the tooling that we get with these three. Right. And I think from my experience in working with other developers and other teams who are actually migrating businesses to Office 365, is that they kind of get tripped up because they're trying to take old InfoPath or old Nintex form or Nintex workflow or SharePoint Designer strategy and technique and apply it to these new modern tools. And sometimes it just takes a different way of thinking. And we really want to leverage this opportunity to talk about that and experience that different way of thinking together. Now, what is the digital equipment request process? Well, this is really your typical, there's a request for inventory or a product or a service. There's going to be a request list that's going to hold all these requests, and then there's going to be an inventory list that's going to have all the options or the equipment that's available for requests, right? So this is not going to be an open, oh, I want this chair from IKEA. You're going to have a set of predefined, approved 4 or 5 office chairs for a user to pick from. So in our scenario, we're not going to really get into like the office equipment. It's really going to be stored, geared towards laptops, iPads, mice, mouse pads, all the accessories, the charging tools, the mobile devices, so on and so forth. So that's one. So the one, we're going to have a request and inventory list that's going to be stored in modern SharePoint. And that's another key thing that I want to highlight, is that when it comes to the Power Platform, though we're using SharePoint as the data source, or really the list and the document libraries as our data source or data repository, you can use anything, right? So Dynamics is probably one of the common data storages in the Power Platform. Or you can use any of those storage capabilities when Azure, so maybe like Azure Storage, or maybe firing up an Azure table or of sorts. So you're not limited when it comes to the Power Platform. We're picking SharePoint. I just want to make it clear, we're picking SharePoint list as our data repository, but that can be any data repository. You can even use Excel as an example. All right, so number two, what is this request going to have? Well, it's going to really have two main forms. You're going to have the request form that the end user is going to have that says, yep, I want this laptop, and I want this wired Bluetooth keyboard, I want this Bluetooth mouse, XYZ. So that's going to store all the requests. And then you're going to have the equipment form that says that, oh, we have the new version. Maybe we have the new Surface Laptop 2. We want to add to an inventory. And then there may be a process around that on how to get that added. So really, you got two main lists, and then you got the forms respective to those lists. And these are not going to be your willy-nilly generic forms. I mean, these are going to really follow a lot of business scenarios or business cases when you start to look at forms in this matter. On the surface, it seems like, oh, okay, fine. I got a list, fire up Power App, specify the fields, which one's going to be required, XYZ. Well, sometimes it's more than that. And that's when a lot of people get tripped up, because you may have a request from maybe a drop-down list, but these drop down lists are not choice options because they need to be dynamic, because you need to dynamically add options to the choice option without going behind the scenes to list settings and adding that manually. Those types of scenarios. So we're going to tackle a lot of that in these Power Apps. All right, so number 3, the request form. The request process, right? The approval process. So from the request piece, you're going to have the approval process. And we're going to do something like, and you will see this in a bit, for the current user, the first level approver is their manager. And then, maybe if it's over a certain dollar amount, there's another finance manager that needs to approve it, so on and so forth. Again, real business scenarios that we have to run into, and how do you solve those using the flow? And I'm not going to go too much deep in what all is in the flow, because I actually have a diagram for that. So the other piece we're going to tackle is the process flow on the equipment side. So, when you want to add the equipment manager has to approve and say, yeah, we have this, or this is discontinued, or no, we're not contract for that. And then you may have a finance manager that needs to approve it because of the cost per unit or whatever the case may be. So we're kind of making that up, but again, just understand that there's a flow for the request side, and there's going to be a flow for the equipment side. All right, and then lastly, but not least, is the Power BI. And this is the one that I think most of the time is missed. And again, this is why Microsoft is really marketing these 3 tools as the Power Platform, because once you do the data gathering with Power Apps, and then you have the process flow and the automation piece with the flow, then you need some KPIs or some analytics to really kind of, provide data to key decision makers, so that way they can make an informed decision on, oh yeah, we're always getting request, or this is the most popular laptop, or these are the departments who are requesting the most, or these are the equipments that are request the most. So, really that type of data and metrics, or these are the number of open items, or these are the number of requests we had within a certain time period. Power BI is going to give you all of that. And the cool thing about Power BI is that it's a user's managed reporting tool, meaning that you don't have to solve for all of the questions initially. You just have to put the tool in front of the user, get them, a low-level training, light-level training on how to use it, and then they can click and tweak and massage and get the right reporting that they need. All right, so that's with the Power BI. So why should we do this? Well, one is to show the power of the Power Platform, especially when you start using all 3 of these tools, and really start to rethink that when you're tasked to solve different solutions based on these similar business cases, that you make sure that you have all 3 aspects covered: the data gathering, the process flow, and then the reporting or KPIs, right? So that's the number 1. Number 2 is that every SharePoint, Office 365 developer, and this is another, and there's a slight piece in there that I really want to touch on. I came from a SharePoint development background, working with 2007, 2010, 2013, all these on-prem, and then now here as of late migrating a lot of solutions from on-prem to the cloud. When it comes to Office 365, you have to know more than SharePoint as a developer. And arguably, I would say you probably want to learn the Power Platform before you really start diving into SPFx. Mostly because, and I'll tell you, and this may raise a brow, because, as a developer, we're so used to digging in the code and C#, and then, updating our skills to React framework, Angular framework, front-end development, and all this other good stuff. But the real business value is going to be more than just, writing a personalized quick links web part on the homepage, whereas you can automate an entire business process for requesting equipment, or onboarding employees, or an automation process for changes or request changes or system changes, or even supplementing ServiceNow for help desk tickets and things along those lines. All of that's going to be baked into the Power Platform. So what's going to happen is that from a value add perspective, I would say the scale is through the roof with the Power Platform on how much value is added to the organization. That's really for a particular department, or holistically in the dollars that you can actually save. I think you're going to see a much bigger bang for your buck with the Power Platform versus onesie twosies or, you know, some elaborate SharePoint web part using SPFx. And I say this because one is, I think you, and you will see this in, you know, in the future slide, but two, Microsoft is developing so much more richer technology and capabilities with out-of-the-box web parts. Not saying that there are gaps. Yes, there are gaps, but they're not stopped either, right? I mean, it's unlike what we're used to where, okay, they shipped SharePoint 2013 and these are the 50 new features that they had compared to 2010, and then you have to wait 3 years to get the new capabilities. No, they're adding new you've seen the Ignite conference and SharePoint conference and all the new features and announcements that they come out, where they're constantly developing this stuff and constantly enhancing this stuff. So I wouldn't hinge my career on custom SharePoint web parts for Office 365 versus building automating tools that can really add value. I think that's going to be the higher demand versus web parts. Okay, enough for that. And another thing that, and actually enough of that particular point, but to complement that point, Office 365 is all over the place. So not only is Office 365 only available to corporations that have $50K or $100,000 to just set up the base minimum SharePoint install, what we saw on-prem, right? The number of servers you need for your dev environment, the number of servers and configuration needed for QA, the number of servers and configuration needed for production and redundancy and all this other good stuff. So once you do all the licensing and all the all the servers, even though they were VMs, and then have, you know, and that's just like the base model, right? That's just out of the box turning the ugly SharePoint on, which everyone hated, and then you start layering, okay, let's do some light branding and let's make it responsive so we can connect to it on our mobile phones and all the other good stuff. So all that was like $50,000 to $100,000 just to turn it on. But now, man, Office 365 with a $20 a month per user license, you have the full capability and full-fledged as any high-end organization, any Fortune 50 organization like EY or even Microsoft themselves or Procter and Gamble. Like, you have, like, as a startup, if you buy, even if you go with the E5 license, which may be overkill for a startup of 3 or 4 employees, that $150 for your 3 employees is going to give you the same capability as the 1.2 million whatever a month EY's paying, because they have 200,000 employees for their instance. It's the exact same feature set, right? So the entry level is a lot lower. So now Office 365 is all over the place, and these business users need these automated processes to help them move quickly and swiftly, you know, with their process. And, you know, with market share, digital era, and all this other good stuff, they're just thinking of more innovative and cool and quicker ways to get things done that they're used to, instead of staying in email and trying to coordinate and operate a lot of stuff in email. I think that's the number one reason why the Power Platform is really going to take off, and it's already taken off. I think it's the suffering piece is that the business want to do something, but there's very little talent out there that knows how to do it, right? So there's a huge mismatch. The demand is way higher than the supply of consultants or independents or freelancers that know how to pull this stuff off. And so this process is really going to help us kind of get through that. All right, so I think I touched on everything there. Right? So, okay, so how are we going to do this? So the first thing we want to do is create these 2 lists. And we're going to talk about the process here. This is just going to give you a high-level overview of what's needed and some of the blueprint that we're going to use to do this. So really, it's 2 lists. You got one SharePoint list for requests and one SharePoint list for inventory. And of course, the next video, we'll hash out what site columns we need, the different types we need, so on and so forth. And we're going to start with this, and as we dig deeper, because it's going to be more agile, we're not going to spend 2 to 3 weeks trying to design and try to get everything right up front. We're going to understand what's needed by the core based on what we know now. And then as we go, if something else is needed, we're just going to roll into the fold. All right. So after that, so once we kind of get your list and you kind of get your site columns together, the next thing you want to do is kind of get your forms, right? So you're going to have one form for the request, or we call the order form. That's really for the end user. Then you're going to have the new equipment request form that's really kind of on the inventory side, or the manager side, whoever's managing these devices and introducing these new devices to the organization, they're going to have a form for that. And then once we have our forms, then you're going to layer in the Microsoft Flow. So on the order request side, you're going to have the approval. Here, I'm not showing all the approvals there for the manager. I would like to throw in the dollar amount because I think that's just a real world scenario that, the first line manager only has approval authority up to a certain dollar amount in the request. Over that needs to go to another manager for the approval. And then you have the equipment manager who's going to really just make sure that what you're ordering is what's on track of what they have, and they're not discontinuing it, or there's not a new model, or the inventory is low and they had to pause requests for that. The other one is the pick list generation. And here I'm just following this flow here. Sorry, I should have numbered these so it's easier to follow. But pick list generation, and this is a common request. How do you take the information gathered from the Power App form stored in the SharePoint list and generate like a PDF or a Word document to where it's printable, or you can email to a client, or you can do whatever based on the information that's selected. So we'll walk through that. And then the shipment notification, I don't think that's going to be a huge deal, but there's a confirmation or email that gets sent to the user that when the actual device is on its way. Now, along this line, what's not shown here, because this is like a high level view of the process, but in here you got, and these are the hidden pieces that you can kind of get tripped up on once you start working through this. One, what's the exceptions to this process, right? What happens if your manager declines it and it goes back to the requester? Then what? Then they have to resubmit it. How do you handle those type of scenarios? How do you handle generating that Word document or PDF based off of list data? What is the best structure to have that to where, one, your process is just not 60, 90, 100 action items in that process, and really kind of, trimming that down by leveraging a lot of expressions. So, those are the key things. So, and this is the piece I get excited about because it's almost two levels, right? So you got the marketing level to where Microsoft pitch it. You say at Ignite, oh, this is so easy, and this is when, we did this in X number of time, blah, 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 blah. And then it's the other piece where it's low level, right? To where you're doing like the bare minimum. But then you got the real case scenario. And the real case scenario is the business scenario that says, when you put this in front of a user who don't have any appreciation on how long it took you to do that flow, or what expressions, or how many hoops you had to jump through to get something done. They're just looking at the process from a usability standpoint that says, no, this is crap. We need this status updates, or we need, these exceptions, or, your PDF generation is nothing but text. How can you make this look more visually pleasing? And don't get a UI UX person on top of this. It's like that would blow everything out the roof, especially when they're trying to customize or design Power App forms. Like, no, that's not going to happen. I mean, it's the same deal with Microsoft, with the SharePoint Modern, SharePoint. Your UI UX people are very limited on what they can do, especially from a look and feel perspective. It's like, this is what we're going to kind of get out of the box. Let's focus on the functionality piece of it. All right, so that's the order process for it. And then when you start looking at the equipment flow, very similar, right? It's the equipment manager. Someone wants to add a new equipment or introduce equipment to the organization. The equipment manager has to take, give their say on it. The finance manager, based on the dollar amount, has to approve it. And then you want to send a notification out to the corporation or the organization that says, hey, the new Surface Laptop 3 is out. It's available. We're rolling these out now. If you want a new one, request it. If your lease is up and all this other good stuff. And I think that's the hidden piece. And and that's another thing. Like we're going to take one scenario of this business process, but there's a lot of real world scenarios out there. Like, what if a person just had a laptop 2 and now they want to request a laptop 3 because it's cool and they want to stay on the cutting edge? Well, most of the stuff is like there's a time period, right? Like most refreshes don't happen for like every 3 years. So just because you want it doesn't mean you're going to get it. Maybe there's an indicator to show how much time is left before you can, they're very similar to like the mobile upgrade piece. Or maybe send them a notification. Here's a good one. Send them a notification when they're available for upgrade, right? Have, kind of putting that capability in front of the user versus the corporation that says, nope, it's time for a refresh. It's time to get rid of it. So maybe there was like an early adoption period, and then there was like, oh no, you had that thing long enough. It's time to refresh it. So, those are things we add to the backlog, those business scenarios. But we can talk through how you would add it to this process. Okay, so then the final piece to this, the third piece to the trio is adding in the Power BI piece. And really, this is just going to give you a nice dashboard. And we have to talk through the scenario, the business case of, I'm a user. I should be able to see my past requests, the status on my past requests, or the status of my current request, or XYZ, right? So I should be able to get inventory of that. But then you have more from a C-level perspective, to where they want to see, okay, how many pieces of this equipment do we have out in the organization? How fast are we turning these things around? How long? What's the average wait time for a request to be processed? Which category of equipment have the most requests? Which category of equipment are hardly ever requested? Really just kind of give you some insight on what's going on. And that's the thing. Like, all these businesses this equipment request process is something that almost 99% of the businesses are doing today, but they don't have the metrics, or it's not automated. So a lot of this stuff is back and forth via email, or there's a separate spreadsheet that's storing a lot of this information, and then from a decision-making process, there is a best guess scenario, right? There is no hard data to really kind of track and really open your eyes on what's really going on. Part two is that we're really doing this from a simplistic equipment request, but as you can see, what you're requesting and what you're processing and the different steps of your flow is what's going to change based on your particular scenario. This could be this could be office equipment, right? Or maybe there's a new location that fired up and you need somebody to kind of manage that. Again, that's the power of this Power Platform. It's really meant to be, let's not use bastardized Excel or bastardized Access databases to solve these problems. Let's train our power users and train our business users, maybe coupled with an IT developer, to kind of push a lot of these stuff over the block and get those three main components that you need, that's really needed for almost every process. So data gathering, process flow, metrics, and reporting. Okay, so how is this going to work? Well, let's learn and grow together. I got to be honest. I'm pretty comfortable with the Power Apps stuff. Pretty comfortable with the Microsoft Flow stuff to an extent. There's a lot. There's a whole new world out there that I'm just not like integrating with third-party systems with REST API, right? If there's not a connector out there, I kind of struggle with that REST API piece. So I don't know if that's going to be a need for here, but we're not going to shy away from it as well. So if that scenario presents itself, then we're going to leverage it. We're going to hunker down, figure out how to do it, and then roll into our solution. So if you're like me, you're busy. You're super busy, right? And then learning this stuff on the weekends and nights is very challenging. And it usually takes something like this. For me, the motivator is, if I know that you're dependent on me and I'm dependent on you, I'm a carve out the time, because you're never going to say when I have time. That's out the window. I think the last time I had time was probably when I was 12 years old or 13 years old. You never have time. You're just carving out the time, right? It's making a commitment, putting it on the schedule, scheduling around it, making sure that you do this. So everyone is busy. So being busy is really not an excuse. But we have to learn this, right? If you are independent, or you're a professional, or if you're a full-timer and this is your bread and butter and you're really banking on Microsoft, as I am, been in the game for 12, 13 years, exclusively SharePoint. Wasn't until like the past 2.5 years that I really started getting comfortable with the Office 365 and all the other products and stuff like that. But now, the same level of expertise or comfort level I have on the SharePoint side, I need that for Power Apps. I need that for Flow. I need that for Power BI, because now when a business scenario presents itself in Office 365 is already in the organization, it's easy to pick and identify those. And you start building your proven patterns and models. You won't believe how many saved up OneNote files I have of all these snippets of formulas I have for Power Apps, or snippets and expressions I have for Flow. You're only as good as based on the scenarios that you've seen, that you work through, and you have to think through and things along those lines. So we have to learn together, and we're all we got. I mean, we have to stick together. I mean, the cards are actually stacked up against us, right? So you got the business moving faster than ever before. The demand is higher than ever before. The technology and the capabilities are forever changing. And, minor SharePoint as an example, I went out there, looked at the capabilities, like, oh, here's the save for later news web part for when you click on news articles and save. Like every time you go into, though there may not be a new web part, or though there's not a new tool or control in the Power Apps toolbox, when you go to those existing controls that you built the form 6 months ago or 9 months ago, and you click on that form now, you see all these new options light up. When you're in the modern SharePoint web part, you see all these new properties, light up, and capabilities light up. So a lot of this stuff is adding and enhancing in the background. So the tooling is changing, the demand is higher, and and everyone's looking at us like, okay, we need this done, and we need this done like yesterday. But here's the good news. The good news is if you get extremely efficient and really, really good at this, you're cranking out a solution like this like no one's business. And they're elegant and they look good, and then you have a repeatable process that you can say, oh yeah, I did this formula, oh I remember this scenario, or I have XYZ, and you have this toolbox of all this stuff, all these cool things that you can implement, whereas someone else who's just starting out, they can spend weeks. I mean, you can spend weeks stuck on one particular problem, and then you have to take a step back and say, how can I solve this a different way, and really start brainstorming on different ways around that. So number 2, drip series format. So if you're familiar with the way that I roll out videos and all this other good stuff, you know that as soon as it's done, I push it out. I don't sit in the vacuum, build out these 5 or 6 videos and then push them out. As soon as I have it, I push it out. So actually, I haven't started on the first video with the list and the Power Apps stuff. So once we finish this, I'm gonna push this out, obviously because you're watching it. But I'm gonna go off and start blueprinting out what the site column name should look like, the list, and all this other good stuff. So as we're going through this process, because it is a drip format, you now have a say on what's in the next video. What are the pieces that you need to see? Maybe there's a scenario part of this equipment process form that you would like to see. If it's low-hanging fruit, though, I think like, oh yeah, that's a common business case. It makes sense to roll it in. But if it's something that's kind of far-fetched or maybe an edge case, we're going to throw it in the backlog, and then that's probably add-ons that we do over time. But leave comments, leave suggestions, and if you already have, especially when we get like, I'm gonna be honest, out of the 3, my weakest spot is going to be Power BI. Now I do have a buddy, Eduardo, who's like a master at it, and he subcontracts with Microsoft all the time, and he's in high demand. So I'm gonna leverage him a lot on trying to do like a lot of this Power BI stuff. But if you see something or in the previous video and you share a tip and trick in there, and then and guys, when someone leaves a comment in the comment section, if you have the answer, jump in and help out, right? And if I feel that you kind of, because some of these are low level, like someone that with experience would know the answer. But then again, I'm not a big one for hacks. Like I actually hate hacks, and I think not doing your homework and not spending enough time to be efficient and really understanding the tooling, and you come up with these hacks, that's the byproduct, right? And that's something, so you have this huge process that's inefficient. You have way more steps than you should have because you're not efficient in expressions, or you jump through all these hoops with Power Apps because you're not efficient with formulas and understanding the different formulas. And this stuff takes time, right? And it's not one of those things where I'm pointing fingers, but then again, as a professional, you have a responsibility to understand the tooling and get efficient with the tooling before you actually go out there and implement solutions. And then we talked about the backlog items. So if there's a comment or something that comes in, if it's a good fit for now, we roll it in. If it's an edge case or something that's kind of far-fetched, we add it to the backlog. All right, that's it. So I'm excited. I think the Power Platform is key. I'm excited about Power Apps and Flow because since my series on Power Apps, and I've never done a series on Flow, but since the series I put out there, there is a lot of tips and tricks that I've learned. So I'm very eager and excited to share those. And then from the Power BI stuff, That's just one that I haven't tackled yet, and I'm really excited to get going on that. So either way, I look forward to this and hoping this brings a lot of value, and we're working together on getting this done, and see you in the next video.